President Obasanjo and I have had this long relationship of being frenemies, as they say. And he goes back, what is self-state or head of state at the time? And I gave him so much wahala, writing pure objective exposés, but we were investigative reporters. We dug deep.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I interjected earlier to say, it really had a big impact in my entrepreneurial journey and what we've built in the business sector. All right. Let's look at another area of it that's also kind of very intersects with your business impacts. Let's, if you don't mind sharing your impacts in the educational sector.
Yeah. Education is so fundamental. People talk about the social sectors. For growth to take place anywhere, the social sectors must be strong, and social sectors are essentially education and healthcare. Princeton professor of economics who won the 2014 Nobel Prize in Economics, Angus Deaton, written this nice book, The Great Escape: Health, Wealth, and the Origins of Inequality, showing what separates the poor from the rich. Essentially, education and healthcare. There can't be healthcare. And we find that we're falling further and further behind in those areas. One of the reasons I'm so angry when I look back at SAP is that SAP killed the Nigerian educational system, because he said, look, let markets take care of. Some things markets don't take care of. And education was a very critical part of that. In looking at economic development, there are two essentially competing models. One model, the model that drove laissez-faire at a point, but generally the markets model that is free trade oriented, that came from Adam Smith. Then you have Frederick List, who is a German-American thinker who looked at a nationalist's position and looked at how nationalism essentially should affect economic choices. That model is what was essentially piggybacked on by the Asians in industrial policy. An industrial policy that led them to grow out of poverty very rapidly. Unfortunately, Washington consensus prescriptions were not Frederick List oriented, they were more Adam Smith oriented. Now, the damage to our educational system is a clear example of that era of judgment in the laissez-faire free market thesis. So there's got to be a mix. And I subscribe to a policy that facilitates private-public interaction and provision of education. And I've been very active. I amazingly found the other day in reflecting that I've been in the proprietorship of primary school, secondary school, and university. So I really run the gamut from days. A cousin of mine was starting a primary school here in Lagos 20-something, 30 years ago. And I chose to put some money in it and to support them. And that school, Madonna Schools, has continued to thrive. She was a teacher at Corona, and she decided to go out and set up this. So that was my primary school kind of entree into the territory. And then, of course, I served on the development boards for the Lagoon Secondary School. Pascal Dozier was chairman, I was vice chairman. And my daughter was one of the pioneer students at Lagoon Secondary School. And I saw the impact of having new ideas about how education should take place. And then, of course, at the tertiary level, I've probably served now on the governing council of, including pioneer ones, of at least 6 or so universities. I was the pioneer chairman of the governing council of Edo University, as with Shanahan University in Onitsha, and of course our own Pan-Atlantic University. So I have seen pioneer work in tertiary education quite deeply.
Idausa University.
Basically, Idausa University is where I didn't name all of them. I just give some examples. The universities, even Ekiti State University, I've served on the government. So Nka Adefayemi was governor. Yeah.
Oh, all right. That's great. Education is one part that a sector of the populace does know you for, especially where the prefix in your name being professor. All right. So, one other sector that most persons of late does associate with you is politics. All right. Let's look at your impact in the political sector. Sorry, please, before political sector, let's look at the civil society, because I think you came from the civil society into politics mainstream. Let's look at the civil society first.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the big problems that we have as a country is that we have not come quite yet to recognize the importance of citizenship. I remind people always about the old Greek typologies of persons in society, and they begin by looking at people who think only of themselves, and those people they call idiots. It was not an insult; it was just a label, but it's now considered an insult to call someone an idiot. But an idiot is somebody who thinks just of himself or herself. When people advance from the idiot stage, they generally become sensitive of the needs of a group that they belong to. So this group might be ethnic group, maybe a religious group, it may be whatever it is, but it's a parochial group. And part of the research that is out there, and one of the ones I find interesting, from Moral Tribes, the book by Joshua Green, is that typically people who are at that level, who are called tribesmen, see everybody outside their tribe as an enemy. So life is a war, constant war between their parochial group and everybody outside their group. Then if they grow further, they become citizens. Citizens see the universal dignity of the human person. And therefore, they can empathize. The death of somebody in America can have some meaning for them and all of that. Part of the challenge of society is to grow citizens who, in the Greek city-state idea, can come to the public square and discuss the common good of all. Nigeria has been challenged with building citizens. What has even happened, sadly, that many people we thought were citizens have dropped not only into the tribesman category, but some to the idiot category in more recent times, especially egged on by politicians who have a goal they're pursuing and redefine reality along those raising sentiments that have led people who you think ordinarily think to fall into the trap of hating their neighbor. Indeed, and in fact, these developments led me to research more stoutly in recent years the work of Carlo Cipolla. Carlo Cipolla was a professor at UC Berkeley, Italian-American, who essentially wrote these books on the laws of human stupidity. Basically says that, look, don't underestimate the impact of stupid people. Most of history has been dominated by behavior of stupid people. And stupid people, I mean, you can do the 4x4 or 2x2. You have essentially people in these quadrants. You have people who are, well, let me start with bandits, who essentially want to harm people for their own gain. You have people who are just helpless, they don't really want to do any harm to anybody or have any care. You have, of course, the category that is the most dangerous category, the stupid people who are happy at harm to people from which they will have no benefit.
Oh,
yes. No benefit will come to them for these people being done harm. But they say, those stupid Jews, kill them. So what happened to Germany? They ended up killing 6 million Jews. And they woke up wondering, how did we manage to do this? And that's increasingly what is happening in Nigeria because of the quality of politicians that we have. So, when we look at the structure of society, we must build civil society that recognizes that democracy and modernity come together in the arena of rational public conversation. I mean, the ultimate philosopher of the public sphere is Jürgen Habermas. And this is the way he defines that's fair. We are marketplace of ideas evolved. So rational conversation. If we're having less and less of in Nigeria, partly because of the weakness of education. Most people can articulate themselves on the issues of policy and all of that. So what's easiest for them is to insult anybody whose name doesn't look like comes from their village. Then you go to Twitter and begin to abuse people they don't know. They don't even know what the people's ideas are. That's where Nigeria is, unfortunately, at this point in time. And, by the way, Cipolla makes the point that number of degrees you have has nothing to do with your stupidity. You have a proper, even distribution amongst the stupid, very highly educated people. And the challenge is for us to question ourselves and question the state of things all the time. Don't say, they've said, yes, okay, yeah. Question it. Think about it. The less number of stupid people we have in society, the better for society. I try to inspire the founding of what we call the New Tribe. And part of what the New Tribe was to do was to recruit from amongst Nigerians around the world people who are not so stupid. And to put their energies to advancing certain issues of the common good within certain cohorts. And in the process of doing that, we can build lakes of sanity that can come together as big oceans of progress.
You just gave an example of New Tribe. I know of Concerned Professionals. I know of the Third Force, which I think is also named as an NC Front, and then the Big Tent. I mean, there are quite a number of, especially in the military era, and dating back. If I could have we could have some of the examples of some of these NCOs.
It's about really committing deep down inside to ideas about how what you call horizontal linkages between members of a society can take place to enable them overcome certain problems. When we talked about a shadow cabinet,
Okay.
somebody wrote there and says, I don't care whether it's a good idea or bad. Why is it always Pat Utomi? Why must it always be him? So it's become my fault that I'm engaging my mind to look for ways we can solve social problems. You see, that's the ultimate stupid position to take. You now find out, as Cipolla was right, stupidity dominates society. I've been in the middle of many NGOs. One example I like to give is some time back during the military rule, I remember a year again now, one of the international foundations, I think it was Ford or so, sponsored corporate governance training on the boards of civil society organizations. The event took place at the Sheraton. So these NGOs are supposed to submit their board members' names they were not nominated to participate. So I believe it was Chuck Mike's performance studio workshop. The younger people may not remember this. There was an African American called Chuck Mike who ran a theater group where you have the J.K. Randall place near Race Course. He used to have what was called Peck Repertory Theater. And they used to use drama to highlight social problems and all of that. And I think Chuck, his group, nominated me as one of their directors to go to this conference. When I arrived there, emotion suddenly broke out because like 10 other NGOs step forward and say, I'm on their board also. I was Stop AIDS at the time. There was this a lady who was running this. AIDS was a big thing back then.
Yes.
So Pearl actually ran Stop AIDS. I was on her board. And so there was quite a number of those boards that I was on back in those days.
All right, thank you so much. Now let's talk about the politics and how we got your impact in that particular sector of it.
Yeah, well, it was many years ago that I met Ayo Adebanjo, and he said, I've been meaning to talk with you. I said, so well, I went to see him. He said, I watch you, great ideas, good heart, a lot of passion for serving the people. You see, activists will never be able to make the kind of impact that a politician will make. Say, if you were in politics, that these all those things, if you came into a position and affected things like this, it would be a phenomenal impact you would make. I want to encourage you to become a politician. This is, in the manner of speaking, some people used to consider politics something too dirty to touch.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't consider it dirty to touch, but I must admit that I thought politicians were beneath me. I was, but Papa Adebanjo tried to encourage that I make the transition from being an activist to a politician. And this whole thing was reflected in the transition from military rule to civil rule. In 1999, when the military was leaving, the concerned professionals who were leading civil society group at that time had a meeting to determine what to do. Meeting was my office. I used to have an office on the Dogutil and Victoria Island at the time. Donald Duke, Tola Mobolori, quite a number of people were there. The late Waziri Mohammed had suggested that a concerned professional had become well known for its clarity of views on how to govern society. Mohammed suggested should transmute into a political party, win power, and move forward. Some in the concerned professionals were of the view that it will give a wrong impression because we came out as civil society, as professionals who wanted to see things done right. If tomorrow become politicians, okay, they use this as skills idea. So the two sides argued their position. I chaired the meeting. For good or for ill, I supported the group that agreed that it might not be a good idea for us to transmit into a political party. So after the meeting, we were standing outside the office, and Donald Duke said to me, okay, I'm going to go and take over Cross River. If you guys don't want to do it, that's your business. And elections took place. The outcomes we know. Obasanjo became president. Because things started going very poorly. And one day we met and decided we made a mistake. Perhaps if we had gone into politics, Nigeria would have been safe. Because what happened was that most of the traditional politicians we thought would move into the space did not trust the military.
Oh.
No, they didn't. Except Ekweme and most of the original politicians didn't trust the military. But the military was really going to go away. So they didn't try to move forward. Especially after Babangida had overturned and cancelled primaries. They thought the space was open and all kinds of bandits, criminals, and people who should never have been allowed to get near politics became governors. And frankly, Nigeria has never recovered, has not recovered from it till today. When they entered, oil prices, to make matters worse, went up dramatically. And these guys lined their pockets, began to call each other sheikh and stuff like that. And they use money to erect entry barriers into politics. It's been downhill since then. So when we try to regroup, to come back to challenge the other, cat had already bolted. And it's been a struggle since then. Anyhow, our group agreed that I should run for president in 2007 as part of that counter. We don't know elections took place in 2007. We went to the polls, all right, but we didn't have elections. And international observers, I remember I was with General Buhari and Waziri Atiku Abubakar. And we tried to have a coalition of opposition presidential candidates to speak up about what happened. And had a lunch with Madeleine Albright, former American Secretary of State, who led their oversight delegation. And at a point, she couldn't, between she and the former Canadian Prime Minister Martin, said, what do you guys call what just happened here? Unfortunately, the electoral process has continued to be an embarrassment. If we're going to make progress in Nigerian politics, first thing to fix is INEC and electoral process. We don't fix those two, it's a waste. You can't call it democracy.
As mentioned earlier, though, I like to also thank you for the impact you made, especially with the introduction of the shadow cabinet. I was in the courtroom the day Justice Omotosho actually did applaud the idea. He said in trying to handle the case, he looked back history as far back as 1914, and Nigeria had no record, either in policies, in laws, or decree of a shadow cabinet. So that you're introducing it actually gave Nigeria some sort of first step into having such conversations on a formal kind of organized opposition in the country. Looking at Nigeria as a whole, every country is shaped by the quality of life of every citizen. is shaped by the economy and the policies around it. And this is where you've played, whether as a public commentator or a political activist or a politician, you've spoken towards the economy and tried to see what impacts can be made in that side. I would like to see you to share the impacts and your thoughts on the economics and the policies of Nigeria.
Well, one of the biggest problems of Nigeria is the absence of proper economic education. And so most people don't really understand the issues. So they get bamboozled by people who half understand the issue themselves. I give myself the task of educating myself. And so I focus as a graduate student on policy economics and a public policy process. And have continued to engage the challenges of development directly as a participant observer and as a researcher. Nigeria went from tradition just before independence of colonial government. I was not interested in creating jobs, manufacturing, and all of that. We just wanted extraction and shipping to their mother country. At the time, Nigeria hit self-government, 1956, 57. There was hardly any manufacturing at all in Nigeria. Probably Nigerian breweries and Federated Motor Industries may be the only factories there were in the country. But in a dramatic turn between 56, 57 and independence, Nigeria had become a significant manufacturing country. As Okibo, if you read his Nigerian public accounts and all of that, shows how the savings that were built up by the marketing boards in England were drawn down to invest in manufacturing. So Obafemi Awolowo started out the Keja Industrial Estate. Okpara responded with Aba, Port Harcourt, Transamadi, Mr. Downer with Kakuri, and of course Bompai and Kanu and all that. So such was a surge in manufacturing that by 1960-61, Nigeria was a significant exporting country of manufacturers. Then came the tragic management of trade policy under the military. And the dangerous alchemy of the convergence of soldiers and oil. And the terrible, terrible impact of oil prices and oil revenues in creating Dutch disease, people abandoning the farms, come and be messengers in NMPC, in the so-called non-tradable goods sector, like construction, rising. And you get the money from oil, you pay Julius Berger to build you stadia and all kinds of things. You get the cement armada just from all the building and all of that. And the people who should be in the farm became construction workers. Once you couldn't pay Julius Berger or whoever it was, they laid off these people. They had left the farm, agriculture died. So, the mistakes of development, compounded by what my friend Richard Joseph called bureaucratic prebendalism, led us down a track that we're still struggling to recover from. Structural adjustment after we went into a debt crisis. Because what happened was as oil revenues came into the pockets of oil-producing countries, where did they save it? In Western banks, Wall Street banks. Those banks were struggling to recycle the petrodollars. They began to say to us that we are underborrowed. Oh, I still remember when General James Olule flew out to go in search of jumbo loans. So we got into a debt trap, as Sherry Payer would call it. Then we began to struggle with the debt trap, and structural adjustment programs became necessary. Those structural adjustment programs were driven by the so-called Washington Consensus, which I've spoken a little bit to, and how it damaged many fundamental parts of what would have sustained our capacity, institutional capacity, with a competitive economy. And the absence of entrepreneurship wouldn't allow us to grow as we could have. So everything about Nigeria today is how you correct it. When I see all the noise made about tax, collect more tax, I have no problem collecting more tax. Tax revenues are important, not so much for the money, but for accountability. Because you see, the whole idea of tax, the so-called Boston Tea Party, no taxation without representation, was about, okay, if you're going to take my money, then I have to know how you spend every kobo. And so the social contract between government and society was about holding government accountable. But we have a reckless political situation in Nigeria. Political class is out of control. They don't care to account. They don't want to account. And they want to collect more revenues. That is the ultimate undemocracy. And that's where Nigeria is lying prostrate. Any attempt to raise taxes means a submission to accountability. But the Nigerian political class is unwilling to account. That's where we are, sadly, and that's the whole business of, look, there used to be a professor of economics at University of Southern California, USC, called Arthur Laffer, became famous for what was called supply-side economics. And it dealt a lot with optimal tax rates. His famous Laffer curve, which, by the way, he gives credit for to a Nigerian graduate student of his. Oh, yeah, on which you do. Laffer shows very clearly that you tax people up to a certain point and you don't get investments and growth is stifled. You have to look at the supply side. So I don't know whether these guys are looking at the supply side. They have no industrial policy. So it's lose-lose.
Thank you so much. We've had a very long conversation around your impacts, experiences, and journey in Nigeria. Just as a way of wrapping up, I would like you to talk to the very young Nigerian who's about setting out in his life, making choices of how to impact and how to actually live his life as his or her life as a Nigerian citizen. And let's talk to like Emengi that is turning 20 in Bayelsa, Adamu that is turning 18 in Sokoto, Igbenga that is turning 19 in Ekiti, or and Emeka in Enugu that is just about 17. How should they prepare their lives? So, what advice do you have for them as young citizens?
I think a number of things should drive the choices they make. First one is they must all make an effort to get the best possible education. It's fundamental to anything you do in this world. Second thing is that geography should matter. If you are in Sokoto, your interests don't have to be the same as a person in Ileunuchi, because your factor endowments of that area can be the basis of the knowledge you grow and the value chains you build up that will lead to your prospering. And very importantly, changing technology will affect everything you do. What's going to be the impact of AI? How do you open yourself to that tech space and integrate into your local factor endowments those technologies to enable you to prosper and enable you to find freedom in this world? Because you don't have freedom if you are economically under provided for. And that freedom should bring you closer to happiness. And the essence of life is the pursuit of happiness.
Thank you so much, Prof. I believe you have had a very interesting journey learning about our growth, some important history of Nigeria in both business, politics, the economy, and other sectors, especially as experienced and lived by Professor Pat Utomi. We always bring you stories of those who have impacted this country and built them. And on that note, I want to especially thank you, Professor Pat Utomi, for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure.
Thank you, guys.